And with us today is Emma, and Emma is a global marketing executive with 20 years of experience working in a variety of sectors with strong experience in destination marketing and tourism. Recently, she led Fiji's tourism industry through the pandemic, ensuring that the destination was ready to reopen, leading in areas like vaccination communications, championing an industry-wide health and safety program, the Care Fiji commitment, and one of the most successful destination reopening campaigns globally, Open for Happiness. Emma was recently named as one of 40 women to watch in APAC by Campaign Asia Pacific. Originally from Scotland, with 12 years in Melbourne, Emma has been based in Fiji for 3.5 years and loves life as a serial expat. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Emma to share her thoughts on this campaign and some of the exciting developments in Fiji. Over to you, Emma.
Hola, and thank you, Adam, for that lovely introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All good. All right, I'm going to share screen. Let's make sure this happens without a hitch.
There you go.
And there we go. Okay, well, I'm delighted to be here and thank you so much for the invite. I'm going to talk to you about our reopening as a destination. We actually ticked over 1 year's reopening on the 1st of December. We've been calling it our borderversary. So there's been lots of celebrations over the last week. As a destination, Fiji's had a really strong reopening and we're feeling really great about where we're at just now. So I just want to kind of take you through the story of where we've been and how we've got to where we are today. It's been really interesting sort of pulling this presentation together and just reflecting on what a journey it's been. You know, it's been a wild ride, but we're just so delighted and thrilled to be out the other side. So a quick introduction. So Fiji is highly reliant on tourism, and if we go back to 2019, we had tourism accounting for 38% of Fiji's GDP. 180,000 people directly and indirectly employed in the tourism sector. We had a tourism industry worth $3 billion and 894,000 visitors annually. Key markets were Australia, New Zealand, US, Pacific Islands, and also China. So, you know, we, as the pandemic happened, you know, we did hope that COVID would never reach here, which seems like a pipe dream now. But we did have a case coming in around about the 20th of March back in 2020. And with that, the government made the very decisive, took decisive action and closed our borders. So the borders closed completely. And, you know, they were then closed until December the 1st last year. In terms of the, you know, the impact it had for the destination, it was, you know, truly catastrophic. Tourism was such an important part of Fiji's economy. We had a really sort of interesting period. At the first case that came in, we actually, our first wave of COVID, we only had 18 cases. It was very well managed. Fiji's Ministry of Health and Medical Services were incredible. So it was really well managed. Everything was sort of tracked and traced. But after 365 days of having no further cases, we then had a breach in our border quarantine, and in April 2021, getting my dates mixed up, we did find that we had quite a significant spread of COVID due to the Delta variant. So we had a really, really difficult period prior to our reopening, with about 6 months where we were sort of locked down, and there was kind of a significant impact on day-to-day life, having had that 1 year with no cases coming through. So in terms of what we had to do as an organisation, you know, in March 2020, we were in a really great spot. As I mentioned, our numbers were fantastic, and the year prior, 2019, was a great year. We had our full marketing plan in place, and we were ready to really, you know, promote our destination. Our job is to bring people into the country, and we found ourselves in this unique position where, you know, in March 2020, as it hit, we were actually sending people home. You know, we were helping tourists to leave the country because we wanted to get them home safely. So, you know, reflecting on what we had to do as a destination organisation, and, you know, how we had to show up, there was 3 key things that I felt were incredibly important. The first thing was that we were always optimistic, and I don't want to say we were optimistic in a way, you know, there was no toxic positivity, but what we did need to do was always plan for the most optimistic of scenarios so that we were ready for when borders did reopen. So, you know, at all times we were constantly thinking about what do we need to do to get the country reopened when the time is right. The second thing we did is we always showed up. So as a destination organisation, it was essential for us to be really visible. Our tourism industry were really looking for hope, and they were looking for a pathway to get themselves through the pandemic. And they were really looking for engagement, both with us, but also with government stakeholders as well. So we played a key role in sort of showing up and helping guide them through the pandemic. And the other big thing was add value. So with our existing kind of business as usual not being the same as it previously was, we had to search for ways and really understand where our strengths lied as a destination management organisation, and really consider how we could add value and be useful in as many ways as possible throughout the pandemic. So I'll talk now about a couple of the key activities that we worked on to help us get through it. So the first thing was we undertook a period of extensive industry communications, and in many ways this has become our new normal. We are constantly communicating with our tourism industry in a way that we didn't do prior to the pandemic. We communicated with them, and we, you know, got together once a year, and you know, we had occasional updates, but through the pandemic this became really constant, and communication was incredibly regular and incredibly important. And I think I heard somebody talk about how it was a period of unprecedented collaboration, and I think that's why Fiji was able to have quite a successful reopening, because the collaboration between government stakeholders, between the different ministries, and between the private sector and ourselves sitting in the middle of that as the destination marketing organisation was incredible. So we made sure that we just grabbed all the different information that was out there, and ensured that our whole tourism industry was on the same page and understood where we were at. So at certain points throughout the pandemic, we were doing daily email updates that was to, you know, tell people how many cases were there, what the plan was, what vaccinations were coming into the country, how they could find how to be vaccinated, just constant regular communication, and we became a really trusted source of information through the pandemic. You know, what we did find that was, in the absence of great information, people were jumping to conclusions and getting really scared. And you know, I think our amazing Permanent Secretary for Health at one point said, you know, panic is pointless, and please always lean into official sources of information. And Tourism Fiji was seen as one of those official sources of information. We did fortnightly webinars with our industry, and that was something we hadn't done before. And I was sort of smiling as I got this image that's on the side of the page. That was our first webinar that we did. We had no idea what we were doing, but we got up and we showed up and we spoke about what our messaging would be in terms of the the sort of interim message that we had in place, given that we couldn't tell people to come to Fiji, we were going out with a really soft message that was sustainably, which means, you know, we'll see you again soon. So we made sure the industry was constantly updated on what our message was as a destination, so that they could align with that message, so that as a destination we were all saying very similar things, just to provide that really united front. We set up a Facebook industry forum, which again sounds like a really simple task, but it was incredibly important. So our whole tourism industry was on there, and actually our key government stakeholders showed up and joined that group as well. And it meant if people were feeling nervous, if they had questions, if they wanted to know an important piece of information, there was that place that they could go to. And we chose Facebook because, you know, in Fiji almost everyone's on Facebook, so it was a really accessible tool and was where people were spending their time anyway. We also set up some industry groups. So we worked closely with the Hotel and Tourism Association and the Association of Transport Providers. And we had collaborative forums and invited key people in from government. And that meant that they were able, that the private sector were able to raise any concerns that they had in relation to, you know, things like they wanted to pause things like vehicle taxes while all their vehicles were off the road. So we were able to facilitate that collaboration and allow that conversation to be had, so that the tourism industry really had a voice and could speak to the right people. So that was a huge piece of what we did, was just constantly communicating with our tourism industry and with all the important stakeholders across our destination, so that we were all on the same page. We also developed a programme called the Care Fiji Commitment, and this was our destination-wide health and safety programme. And again, this has been something that has been really looked at as an example of best practice for what a destination has done to get through the pandemic. What we realised very, very early on as we started speaking about reopening, we knew that marketing alone wasn't going to give consumers the confidence to come back to our destination. We also heard that industry didn't know where to start in terms of what health and safety standards would look like moving forward. We knew that there would be an increased expectation of health and safety, but not everybody across our industry knew what that would look like. We were finding that some of the big chain hotels, so people like the Marriott Group, the Hilton, Radisson, who have a good sized presence in Fiji, they were really clear on what they had to do, because they had head offices that were actually providing them with really clear guidelines. But for our smaller players, or small businesses or privately owned operators or locally family owned operators, they just had no idea where to start. So we actually developed a destination-wide health and safety programme. We leaned into best practice in adult learning and developed an online platform where people could go. It was really interactive. We used videos and online quizzes to actually educate people on what the new health and safety standards would look like. And we worked really closely with the Ministry of Health and Medical Services, who actually endorsed the programme and signed off on all the content within the programme. So not only was it meeting consumers' expectations, but it was meeting the expectations of our government in terms of what it would take, not just to keep tourists safe, but also to keep our people safe. So our tourism businesses were accredited following this comprehensive training, and we actually worked with a third party to go through the accreditation process. The big thing about the Care Fiji commitment was it built confidence, and I cannot stress that enough. It built confidence in our tourism businesses that they could actually understand what they needed to do, and once they reopened, it went right down into details like what happens with a suspected case, what happens with a confirmed case. And actually Fiji, all of our hotels had to hold back a certain percentage of their rooms to be used as hotel quarantine in the instance that a guest tested positive. So we had all those really clear guidelines in place, and even right down to how to quarantine a guest in a way that makes them still feel special and important, but keeps everybody incredibly safe. So we had all that training in place. So that gave our tourism businesses a lot of confidence. It gave our Ministry of Health and Medical Services confidence that the tourism industry knew what it was doing in terms of health and safety, and that when we did reopen, we would do all that we could to keep both tourists and local Fijians safe. And then finally, we had a lot of communications around it. So we created some video content, and that allowed us to give consumers confidence. That it was a huge part of our reopening communications. We knew we had to inspire people to come to Fiji, but we did also have to give them that confidence that it was a safe destination and we would do all that we could do to uphold safety. So an amazing programme, and that really was the reason that Ministry of Health and Medical Services gave us the go-ahead to actually reopen, and felt that the tourism industry would know what they were doing when the time came. Vaccination communications. So, you know, vaccination was a key pillar in our reopening. We wanted to get as much of our population vaccinated as possible, as quickly as possible, and Fiji did an exceptional job in terms of rolling out vaccination. And I cannot talk more highly about our Ministry of Health and Medical Services. But what we did as part of that is recognising that we were communication experts, is that we helped support the communications rollout. So we sat down with the Ministry of Health and Medical Services and took all the important scientific information that they had, and used our skills as communication experts to develop really clear FAQs, clear key messages, just so that we were able to work together to get the word out to say how important vaccination was. We then used our channels, and as I mentioned earlier on, we did so much communication and we had a whole heap of communication channels to get to the tourism industry, and we created a whole of industry effort to get the population vaccinated. So to bring that to life, we did things like we opened up our hotels to be vaccination hubs, so people could actually go to hotels that were quiet because we were, we didn't have tourists in them, and they would set up a vaccination hub in the lobby. Our transport providers also transported people from A to B to get vaccinated. We have 333 islands in Fiji, so there's a lot of outer islands, and actually our tourism industry came to the party, and we were able to use people's boats to get teams from Ministry of Health and Medical Services out to the outer islands and out to island village communities, so that people in those communities could be vaccinated as well. It was important for us to do that to protect our populations, but also in terms of getting reopened, it became a really important piece. Our Tourism Fiji office was also used as a vaccination hub, so that was a really great way that we could directly contribute as well as helping from a comms perspective. As the vaccination became more popular and more people were getting vaccinated, when we got to around about 70% of the population being fully vaccinated, we worked in conjunction with Tourism Australia, and we partnered up to do It's Our Best Shot for Travel, which is a Get Vaccinated and Get Ready campaign. So that was an actual marketing campaign within Fiji, where we spoke to our people about how vaccination was the best way to get our borders reopened, and that really helped us get that additional sort of 20% or so that were sort of sitting on the fence and questioning whether or not they should be vaccinated. So a lot of work that we did in that space, again using Tourism Fiji's skills as communication experts, just to really help the government and their vaccination rollout. And then finally, we worked on a major tourism campaign. So our campaign was Open for Happiness. Tourism Fiji's brand proposition at the moment is Where Happiness Finds You. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we leaned into that happiness brand positioning, and created the message Open for Happiness to really just draw attention to the fact that we were reopening. It was a really simple but a unifying message. All of our partners aligned in that message. So all of our trade partners, so the people who were selling Fiji, actually used our toolkit and used that message Open for Happiness, and also Fiji's tourism industry given the fact that we communicated with them so consistently through the pandemic, they also were really quick to jump on and also share that Open for Happiness message. So the whole destination was saying the same thing. We did a major campaign which featured an A-list celebrity, and that meant that we got global reach, so more reach than we could have ever purchased with our small media budgets. And we achieved 3 billion eyeballs, all of which was saying that Fiji is now open for happiness. And we had a strong above the line advertising spend plus ongoing digital spend. I think the most successful thing about our Open for Happiness campaign, or one of the most successful things, was the PR that surrounded it. So not only did we get PR because we had a celebrity in town, but we also got PR because of our reopening activities, which was exceptional. On the day that the first flight arrived, we had a whole heap of fantastic entertainment on at Nandi International Airport. And there was really emotional scenes as people, you know, got off that first flight and were able to say hello to family members again. But more than that, it was a lot of tourists who were just desperate to get back to Fiji. We have high levels of repeat visitation, and people had really missed Fiji. Not only that, but people really felt like they needed a holiday after the pandemic, and who didn't need a shot of happiness. So we found that those images from Nandi International Airport actually went viral right across the world. You know, people were talking about Fiji's reopening and just how awesome it had been. So that's where we're at just now in terms of what our recovery looks like and what's next for us as a destination. So recovery is going incredibly well. This graph that I've got up here is slightly old. It only takes you up to August. But as of the end of October, we're at almost 500,000 visitors. In October, we were at 90% of 2019 numbers. When we did our initial projections, we didn't think we'd get back to 2019 numbers until 2024, but we're feeling really confident that we'll get there next year, which is a great story. Fiji's not a mass destination. We don't have huge numbers of visitors, and actually throughout the peak season when it's school holidays in Australia and New Zealand, our rooms get practically full, but we do have quite a pronounced off season where we're not quite as busy, and we haven't actually seen that quite as bad this year. So we've seen that October, November and right through to December, our numbers are actually strong, really strong, and we're not so concerned about the off-peak season. So it looks like we are being able to sustainably create visitation across the year instead of having those huge spikes, which is amazing. So yeah, the borders reopened on December the 1st. We did have a number of restrictions, and that's been iterative. So when we first reopened, we had a 3-night mandatory stay in a Care Fiji commitment hotel, but people were allowed to leave their hotel and go and participate in other Care Fiji commitment activities. That was removed after a while, and when we removed our in-country rat test on September the 5th. So we did have some restrictions in place for quite some time, but now the only restriction to get into Fiji is that you do have to be fully vaccinated and have insurance that covers COVID cover in case you do test positive when you're here. But as mentioned, our visitation numbers have been really incredibly strong, and they're looking to stay fairly strong going forward. But what we do need to do is really make sure that we maintain the fantastic momentum that we've had, and continue to drive strong visitation in a sustainable way. So what we're doing is we're having a look at our brands at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, our brand tagline is Fiji, where happiness finds you, and it's been in place for 12 years. And we've done a recent review of this, and we've seen that you know, happiness as a concept and as a brand, a real brand platform for Fiji is gold standard. It rings true both to our visitors, but also locally. When we speak to local Fijians about how they feel about happiness as a part of our brand, the response is always incredibly positive. But we do know that there is a global industry of happiness, and if you can talk about a sugary sweet fizzy drink as being synonymous with happiness, then what does that mean for us as a destination? We've also seen a huge shift from a consumer behaviour, and we're seeing that people are really favouring authentic experiences. So I've talked a lot about visitor numbers, but what I haven't mentioned is that we have seen people staying longer, spending more. They're more satisfied than they've ever been, and they're also participating in many, many more activities. So whereas before, we've always been trying to shift people from coming to their hotel and just flopping and dropping, we are actually now seeing that people are really craving much more experiences. All of our day trips are reporting much higher visitation than they have in the past, even much higher than 2019. So the authentic experiences is something that's just, incredibly important. And Fiji is just full of fantastic cultural experiences. So we're looking at having a fresh take on happiness, one that centres not just on the tourists. So previously it was where happiness finds you. But what we're really doing is focusing on the truth that Fijians live life in a way that really inspires happiness. So we're doing a bit of work both on our logo and our brand at the moment. Our logo will be changing, and I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek. It's a secret because it's not launched yet. Another couple of weeks before we launch, so you guys have seen it first. But our logo centres on our Massey. We developed this Massey about 4 years ago, and it's a Massey print is and design in tapa is a traditional form of art in Fiji, and we developed this about 4 years ago, so it's been part of our brand for a while. We worked with a local artist to do that, but we're really just heroing in on this and using it in a much more overt way, and working really closely with the designer to make sure she's comfortable with that. But it really does just celebrate and shares the culture, and the different, talks a bit about life in Fiji and the story behind the Massey. We've got a piece of video that will tell that story that you'll see in a few weeks once we relaunch it. And this is our new logo and our new brand positioning. So Fiji, where happiness comes naturally. Again, we've done extensive testing and we're feeling really, really great about it. And if anybody's been in Fiji, I know Aaron was here recently, I think you'll agree that it really does just ring true. There's a Fiji feeling that people experience when they come here, and it's hard to describe. It's not necessarily big belly laughs and lots of grins, but there's this sort of inner contentment that comes when you spend time with people in Fiji. There's a few reasons for that I won't go into, but some of the main reasons are, spirituality, living in the moment, and Fijians just have the most beautiful way of finding fun in almost everything that they do, and I can say that as someone who's lived here for nearly 4 years. We're working closely on communicating our brand around 5 key pillars that we've identified as things that are really important to visitors who visit and are really important as part of Fiji. So our natural environment, our adventurous experience, the connections that you have with local people here in Fiji, the fact that people are desperate to share with you and also really happy to welcome you almost as part of their family, to recharge and reconnect with what's important, and also the amazing local food and drink that we have here in Fiji. So in terms of what's next, as mentioned, we will be relaunching that brand over the coming weeks and months, and we've got some beautiful assets to share alongside that. We'll be leaning into the learnings that we had with the Care Fiji commitment to take a whole of destination approach to sustainability. Currently in our destination, there's a lot of amazing things happening across many of our properties in terms of environmental sustainability, but for us, sustainability means so much more than that, and there's an important role for our destination to play in terms of cultural sustainability as well. So we want to make sure that we have some real structure around a whole of destination programme, and we have got proven experience in developing a programme that can educate, inspire, and get everyone on the same page. So we'll be leaning into the learnings from the Care Fiji Commitment programme to develop our whole destination approach to sustainability. We're working on a partnership with the GSTC, which will help to bring that to life. We're also working on a lot of destination development. We want to learn from the mistakes that other destinations have made. We do not want to be a destination with high-rise hotels all across our hotel. That's just not what Fiji's all about. We have 333 islands, so there is an opportunity for us to really drive dispersal across our tourism product, and also really partner with some of our smaller family-owned tourism businesses. My team and I spent a couple of days at Namosi Eco Retreat a few weeks back. If you ever want to get off the beaten track and really find yourself reconnecting with what's important, I would highly recommend it. Namosi Eco Retreat. It's the best. But yeah, products like that really do an amazing job of cultural tourism, that are family owned and really show people what Fiji's all about. They're the type of partners that we're really looking to work with, and ensure that there's more of them across our destinations so that we can really bring our brand to life. We're working on a 5-year plan, which will happen in consultation with our government, and they're also working on a national sustainable tourism framework that we will help to deliver and roll out, as I mentioned before. And then, you know, we're continuously looking at our brands, and, you know, working out the activities that we want to do so we can connect to potential tourists globally. In summary, if you haven't been to Fiji, I'd highly recommend that you come and visit, because I can almost guarantee that happiness will come naturally. Some of the sort of values that are really evident here in Fiji, and you know, some of the things that really make our destination really special. Connection. When people leave Fiji, they always talk about the best friends they've made, whether it's, you know, somebody in the local shop that they've been shopping in, or the barman at the hotel. You know, the people in Fiji is what really stays in your heart a long, long time after the suntan fades. Happiness, you know, happiness for us in Fiji, it's not superficial, it's not turned on for the tourists. And I had somebody who came over recently and they said to me, oh my goodness, everywhere I go, people say bula, bula, bula. They must train them so well. And I was like, oh my goodness, no, that's not trained. Like, that is completely and utterly natural. And I took my son back to Melbourne a few months back, and he was sort of slightly horrified by the fact that not everyone was saying bula to him. You know, it's quite a special thing, and it doesn't just happen in the tourist areas, it happens everywhere. Generosity. So I don't think I've ever walked past the lunch table in the office without people saying, come sit, share my food, share my food. There's a belief here in Fiji that nothing is really yours until you have shared it. And you really feel that in the destination. People are so willing to share a little bit about themselves, or, you know, the delicious food that they're eating. So that generosity is something that you feel, you know, really deep when you're here. And inclusivity, we are a very diverse destination, and you know, the bula spirit that you experience here is incredibly inclusive. It doesn't matter whether you're going to stay at Lathala Island Resort, which costs, you know, $10,000 US a night, or whether you're staying at Namosi Eco Retreat. Everyone is treated the same in our destination, so it's incredibly inclusive. So that's all from me. I'm really happy to take some questions. As I mentioned, it's been 12 months since we reopened, and, you know, 2 years of living in a pandemic world before that. So there's been lots and lots of learnings. And, you know, I live in Fiji, so I have learned that generosity, and I'm more than happy to share with you guys if you do have any questions.
Thanks, Emma, for your insights, and indeed very fascinating to see the pitch on returning and reopening to happiness, because clearly the last 2 years, maybe 3 years for some destinations, has been this cabin fever, people looking at virtual spaces and longing to visit in person, and obviously over the weekend benefited very much from that long trip to Fiji after almost a decade. I want to be opening this time to the floor to see if anyone has got questions or comments for Emma.
I didn't catch that, if that was a question, sorry.
No, Jessica, was there a question from you?
No question.
No?
Okay.
Emma, I might just ask about, obviously, from an industry that is very much person-centric, the workforce becomes a very core at the global heart of the tourism and hospitality industry, in a time when globally there is this skills or shortage. Can you perhaps see how the current workforce in Fiji are perhaps their attitudes towards the reopening and coming back to industry to work, because the last 2 to 3 years they probably have done something else, and where does this conversation of happiness, does it become a natural magnet for them to come back to the sector?
Yeah, there was a lot of concerns about people returning to work. There was a lot of concerns because what tended to happen is that a couple of things happened. Lots of people went back to their village and started sort of living off the land, and that worked really well for them. So a lot of our industry were really concerned that they wouldn't be able to encourage the staff to come back to work. We haven't seen that so much of an issue. We found it was a little bit slow at the start, but then people have very slowly trickled back to work and to the jobs that they love in many cases. The other thing that happened was that some of our tourism industry who were let go and didn't have jobs during COVID actually started up small entrepreneurial enterprises, and that was actually awesome. Like, it was really amazing. Like, all of a sudden there was a plethora of donut makers and people making sourdough and a real artisan industry. And what we found there is that the best ones have sort of risen to the top and have stayed around. You know, some of them have decided to go back to work, but we found that that sort of cottage industry type thing has become a really interesting thing for our tourists, and they're actually really enjoying the different sort of small business opportunities that there is now to participate in Fiji. I think some great examples, we had a small pop-up. There was some film crew caterers who, during the pandemic, obviously there was no film crews coming to Fiji, so they set up, first of all, like a home catering business, then they set up a little stall in the market, doing really cool on-trend foods, and they've now recently just upgraded to a proper restaurant in one of our key tourism areas. So you've really seen the fact that the pandemic did, you know, cause them major issues at the start, but they've really been able to capitalize on it, be entrepreneurial, and develop an awesome product. We also have a peanut butter brand now, a small company, family-owned company, who were based in New Zealand, decided to come back to Fiji during the pandemic. The husband is Fijian, and they've developed this amazing brand, and they were really struggling. They were selling like very few jars during the pandemic, but now that tourism has kick-started again, they are doing food service supply, people are buying it and taking it back to Australia and New Zealand, and they've started to get a really great reputation. I would say on the labour thing, one thing that's an issue for us is we're losing great staff to Australia. So there's the knock-on effect of the fact that the backpackers and the work and holiday visas haven't fully rebounded in Australia. So there's a shortage of labour in Australia, and there's a scheme with the Pacific Islands where people from the Pacific Islands can go over to Australia and work. We're actually losing some really good people at the moment, which is a shame, because they're often leaving reasonably professional roles to go and do fruit picking or something in Australia, because they can earn more money in that way. So that's something that we are concerned about, something that's an ongoing conversation in the tourism industry about how do we retain talent and make sure people feel valued enough and feel that they've got excellent career progression opportunities here in Fiji, so that they don't leave for a quick dollar overseas. We fully understand why they do it, but you know, it is something that the HR professionals in the country are really having to look at.
Thank you. I note that Bilal, you've got your hands raised. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much, Emma, for a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask if what was the role of community, because there was a slide which was demonstrating something about community. So all along, how did you take them along, and how crucial they were, and in this way forward, how you are taking them along? Because I am from a destination here, a mountain destination here in Pakistan. It's named Murray. It's a beautiful destination. Sustainability, ecotourism are big concerns here, and one of the major concerns we have is community, like taking community along in this tourism development. So please enlighten us with your approach taking community along.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's probably not something that we've fully mastered the art of as yet, in an area that I know that our Ministry of Tourism and Commerce and Trade, they are really, really focused on. One of the things that we have in our corporate plan is to develop a study, for want of a better phrase, to actually assess the broader community's feelings about tourism. So at the moment, it's very, very ad hoc what we do from a community perspective in terms of community engagement. We work really closely with the government. My team worked really closely with the Ministry of Etoki Affairs. So we're constantly consulting, but in terms of direct consultation with communities, it's not something that we have a program around, but it's definitely something that we'd consider looking at in the future.
Thank you, Bilal and Emma, for your answers. Does anyone have another question for Emma?
I might pass that question back to Bilal if he's got any best practice in terms of what he's doing in terms of engaging with communities. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, if you allow me. Actually, what we are doing right now, we have taken the students along, and we are going to the villages, and then the students, every student from different villages we have here, it's a kind of a town, and every student is responsible for building a B&B model, and along with some organic kind of menu. And because, what we realized is, like, when people come to this town, the city center, actually, our town center, what we call it, when they buy anything, actually, they buy, if, for example, $1, and maybe 90% of that money just goes back to some cities far away, or maybe outside the country, because the products are, not local products. So what we did is we took the students along, and we tried to develop some local cuisine, local products, local souvenirs, and especially the women empowerment is our major motto. And we are taking the women along, the females along, the girls like who are studying with us. We are taking them along to develop these things, to make sure that the community gets the benefit of the practices of the tourists. And then more and more the plans, the tourism plans, the tourist plans towards the villages. So we are taking towards them towards the villages and, developing new plans, how they can explore nature more, the real kind of, destinations in their real forms. So that's what we are trying to develop, involving the community along. We have also had many meetings with the stakeholders. We took along the community, members who were influentials. We have been meeting them. We are going to the villages, and we have been asking them to collaborate. And it's been really nice experience until now. And we hope that we will, build on this in the longer term sustainably.
Yeah, that's awesome. Absolutely awesome. Yeah, lots of good learnings there. I think from a resourcing perspective at Tourism Fiji, we wouldn't have the resources to be able to get direct engagement with all communities, just because we're a whole country. But what we do is we work really closely with our hoteliers, who then have really strong relationships with their local communities. And obviously our sustainability program, just in terms of things like, the types of entertainment they put on in hotels sometimes aren't authentic. So we're developing a sort of cultural tourism framework to make sure that they are always prioritizing the most authentic experiences that people can have in Fiji, because that in turn it encourages communities to ensure that they're passing down traditions, right down across the generations, because they are things that need to keep alive. So no, some really interesting insights there, Bilal, and I'll certainly take them into consideration in my conversations with our tourism ministry.
Thank you. It was nice learning from you as well.
You're welcome.
Emma, just on your probably the second last slide, you introduced the collaboration with the indigenous designer, and I just wanted to find out what kind of products or artifacts will come out of that. Would that be like an actual print? Would it be an actual carpet or apparel? What is the idea here moving forward?
Well, she has developed the actual physical massie for us.
Okay.
So hold on, and I will go. So this here is actually, we physically own this in our office. It's bark cloth. That's how it's developed. So we've used that to develop our new logo, which I showed you. So some of the background print appears in the logo. But we're also working really closely with Wati, because she's a local entrepreneur. So she isn't able to do things mass at scale, because she is just a small business. But we are looking at ways that we can purchase merchandise from her. So things like tote bags, small versions of the massie that people can put up on their walls, that type of stuff. She was, the work that she's done for us and with us, she is remunerated in an incredibly fair way, and we work really closely with her in terms of how we're translating things to make sure that she's really comfortable. We then double check our sort of translation of the storytelling with our Ministry of Itoki Affairs. So my team, who are based here in Fiji, support me in that process, because it's their culture. And obviously, as you can tell by the accent, this is not a Fijian accent. So I lean very heavily on my team to lead that process and work really closely with Wati. It's been great though. It's been a really lovely collaboration, and she's incredibly excited about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated with the indigenous cultures that's coming up, and I think, other than also art and music and dance and so on, a lot of this would probably also manifest. You mentioned cultural tourism type of itineraries, potentially even indigenous food cultures, the logo and the storytelling around it. I think that's an area to kind of diversify, the traditional cruise market or just the resort market in Fiji.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think what's happened over the years is Fiji's become so familiar, you know, particularly with visitors from Australia and New Zealand, that there's almost been a decoupling of, you know, what an amazing tropical destination this is, but actually what a rich living culture there is. And that rich living culture is what we're really trying to bring to the fore as part of our brand refresh. So the new brand ads that we've got, for example, take a very different approach from what we've done in the past, because everything that we're doing is about showcasing Fijian culture first and foremost. For me, I think it's exactly what people are looking for right now from a tourism product, but also here in Fiji, it's just so important. There's such a sense of pride around the culture, and it's just so important that we preserve that, because there's so much that the world can learn from it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with comment or questions? Well, I might just ask for you, Emma. So now that there's some plans in place, there's that exciting sustainable tourism framework that's coming up, the next 3 to 5 years, other than the Australia, New Zealand market, which is, you know, the very familiar close short haul markets, what is Tourism Fiji's aim the next 3 to 5 years in terms of building, well, not just resilience, but also regenerative tourism outcomes with potential markets that you hope to see come back, or new ones that you are creating for Fiji?
Yeah, so despite the fact that we're up at sort of 90% of 2019 numbers, we haven't actually seen full rebounds. So our Asian markets obviously haven't, you know, we're not getting any visitors from China, for example. Our Asian markets haven't rebounded. We're still seeing that Europe and the UK and Europe is quite slow, but I know that Australia's feeling that as well. So there's some natural growth just to come out of that. From the USA and Canada, we have a perception that our destination is slightly unattainable. So people think of Fiji and they think that it's an incredibly, you know, luxurious destination that costs a lot of money and is really hard to get to. So we're doing a lot of work in the US and Canada of shifting that perception to, you know, encourage more people to see Fiji as somewhere that's not that much more difficult to get to than Hawaii, for example. And actually from a cost perspective, it doesn't need to be the greatest of all trips. It can also just be something that you do over the course of your normal holidaying. So there's a lot of work to do there. So in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, I do think it's about continuing this rebound, about getting our, you know, cultural tourism framework in place, our sustainable tourism framework in place, and also just, you know, seeing what sort of investment we can have in the destination. There is still opportunities. There's still some areas that feel like they don't fully benefit from tourism, either because they don't have the products in place, or because they get, you know, there's a feeling that visitors migrate to some of our bigger areas like Denarau, Coral Coast, Mamanuca Islands. So there's a lot of work that we can do in really showing more of Fiji as a destination, encouraging people not to go to those you know, standard locations and actually travel around a little bit more. Like a Fiji road trip on the mainland is awesome, and not many people have done that. So there's a lot that we can encourage people to do outside what they would traditionally think of Fiji for.
Thank you. And thanks once again, congratulatory messages in the chat as well for clearly a challenging time, and yet, you know, being able to rebound and open up with the confidence and instilling that across different markets as well. Thank you, Emma, for your time, and thank you to the audience for being here and joining us this afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world. The next session, for many of you interested in the workshops, will start in about 15 minutes or so. So feel free to check back in later on. Once again, thank you, and we'll see you again. Vinaka.
Vinaka Vakalevu, Modi everyone.